A lot of collaboration is going to be needed between the different, between the indigenous nations and the people that go out there and hunt and harvest, but also the cattle range tenures, working with the forestry companies on new practices. I definitely see it's possible, but it's also beneficial. Sometimes we're pitted to be competition against each other, but how can we become more in collaboration, work together? And it's for all of our benefit, protecting those headwaters and the grassland. Tessa Terbasket. My partner's name is Howie Wright, and we just bought this farm last year, and we are slowly growing our farm business here and hoping to grow more into a farm and pig ranch to produce meat for local customers. These are our current cows that we have here on the farm. One thing that we try to really in our vision and promote is sustainable farming practices, ranching practices in agriculture. So we're always looking at ways that we can conserve water, make sure that we're not polluting the local watershed in in any way. But also importantly is we really believe in animal welfare, their health, but also that they're just looked after well, and even their happiness. We definitely believe that reflects in the quality of their meat and product afterwards, but also just giving them the best life possible. It's really important to us. And as you can see, these guys are all having a nice morning nap in the sun here after having some good breakfast of grass. And we've been also getting some beer grain, which is from the local breweries here. So it's the beer mash. So it's a variety of grains that you get, and through their process, all the sugars are boiled out of those grains, so they're really high in fiber and protein and really good for them. And of course, these guys really like it. But we ultimately want to keep growing our herd every year and really make a go and a business out of it and see how we can do it while being small scale, but also sustainable. I think Kelowna needs to know the small farms in the area. They need to know where their food is coming from. And consumers have power to make change. It's definitely tough for small-scale agriculturalists, farmers, ranchers in the region to make a go of it. With those bigger, larger corporations out there, and some of those cheaper meats where you don't know came from in the food store necessarily, or how old it is. It comes in plastic packaging. It's not very sustainable. And those animals, if you think about their welfare, some of them have come from large feedlot situations and didn't have a good life. And you definitely taste that in the meat. It's reflected in the meat. There's such a difference, especially when we think of the pork and the beef here. When we taste it, and that bacon, it tastes completely different than the stuff that you get in the larger grocery stores. And yeah, I just really encourage Kelowna, Okanagan residents to source out the local farmers and ranchers to buy meat directly from that farm, to cut out that middleman. I know a lot of farmers, it's too bad because there's this middleman that controls those prices, that boosts it up in the grocery store, and then farmers get a lot of flack, but that's not us that cause that price. The grocery store just has to adjust it. But we here strive to provide fair, sustainable pricing as well, to make it accessible for all families in the Okanagan. So I'm the oldest of my generation, and I have tons of younger cousins. So I'm always worried or concerned of how they're going to be able to pick up the legacy and carry on. And, land prices are only going up in the Okanagan. The population is supposed to double within the next, I forget how many years. but we need a more holistic approach. We only see development going further into ALR or up the side mountains instead of going up perhaps in our urban centers. So how do we protect not only those rangelands, but also our farmlands for youth? It's definitely, and I have so much hope and belief for the next generation, especially farmers. I mean, it's definitely a harder way of life. You're definitely not going to become wealthy or rich, but the quality of life is so valuable. And both me and my partner, we still have full-time jobs while we operate this farm. So when it's a lot of work before we go to work and then after work, but it's such fulfilling work. Just being out with the animals, working outside. My partner has 3 boys of his own, so teaching them the practices, getting them outside into the dirt and connecting with the animals is so important. I see a vision forward. I think a lot of small-scale farmers and ranchers in the valley have similar visions. We might have different perspectives on how we grow our animals or grow our grass and how we do the business. But we all have the same vision for the future, that we want to ensure that this lifestyle, this way of life of small-scale farming, of ranching, of agriculture can continue on, not only for our own family legacies, but for future generations. It's the way we should all be living to become perhaps less globalized and more localized. And that when consumers, when they're in the grocery store, to be really conscious of that. Like, where are you buying that garlic from? Is it coming from China? Like, maybe you shouldn't buy that, even if it is cheaper. Same when we think of fish resources. On the BC coast, a main buyer of those aquaculture is the Asia markets. But does that make sense to be sending fish across the oceans? Localized foods is so important, and I think with climate change and growing population and finding a new way to live in better harmony with the earth and all our resources, because they are becoming stressed, is so important. And this notion of food security is so important. And how do we secure not only but healthy local foods for our local communities? There's so much awareness that needs to happen, especially I think in education, more awareness campaigns out there. I mean, there's local NGOs that are starting this to do this work, especially, and I see it happening with the younger generations. There's a slow food movement happening. But we really need to start, those consumers and those family homes really need to start changing their demand of what foods they want access to. I think is so critical moving forward. And we're so fortunate to live here in the Okanagan Valley. It's so lush and fertile, not only for in the floodplain area for like growing hay, for instance, or crops or orchards, but also when we think of the whole watershed, and in the upper mountains there's game, there's berries, there's roots, lots of wild foods, for instance. And also promoting that sustainable harvest of those is so critical. And we need to definitely think how we're going to, as farmers and ranchers, for instance, so up in those headwaters, how to restore those ecosystems and to balance those interactions between my cattle, for instance, and the local deer or moose, and how do I make sure that me and my family's range doesn't impact those ungulates, because it's all connected. We definitely live in a world where things are siloed and we manage things separately. But I think we need to move forward in a more systems thinking approach. We need to think about our water resource, for instance. When we manage our foods, we can't keep up this lifestyle if we're going into severe droughts, for instance. So what are more plans to help protect that? And I think there needs to be more supports for our local farmers for sure. It's definitely one thing that we're facing. So with the COVID, what we're seeing, there's definitely a changed mindset. More requests and demand from families and citizens that want that more local meats or eggs, for instance. But we're having a heck of a time. So for our BC farm status, we have to get our animals butchered at a BC facilitated facility, and same with a butcher. And it's everywhere is booked up, and there's not that many facilities around in the Okanagan. We're not the only ones facing this. A lot of other farmers it's backed up, and I've heard some people are on waiting lists till next January. So, and what does that mean for us moving forward, or what can be some different supports put forward from the province just to help the farmers in that regards? To write letters to your local MPs to support local farmers, to provide more supports for that killing and processing process, especially for the meats, is so important. Also, just become more aware. There's so many different local NGOs or advocacy groups, to start following them on social media or do some Google searching. Find what resources are out there for your kids to learn more, because that connection to food and animals, I think, is just so beneficial for kids, and how they act and who they grow up to be in this world I think that next generation is so important.